as he tells the story of the Scopes trial through a photographic history. The trial took place in 1925 in Dayton, Tennessee, and centered on the legality of teaching Charles Darwin's theory of evolution in public schools. The author also discusses the impact the trial had on the town.
Good morning. Welcome to this session of the Southern Festival of Books. This is a session where we are featuring an author, Edward Caudill, who has written a book, and I use the term a little bit loosely because it's a photographic history of the Scopes trial. The title is The Scopes Trial of Photographic History. I ask each of you, if you're interested in the book following this session, Mr. Caudill will be at the signing colonnade to sign and autograph the book, and if you purchase the book, it will support the festival, and we'd appreciate it. Mr. Caudill teaches at the University of Tennessee, and he's Associate Dean of Graduate Studies. He's had a long-standing interest in the subject of the Scopes trial, and he's written another book called Darwinian Myths. I do not, without further ado, there will be a question and answer session following this, and you will have a chance to ask any questions you wish of him. And now I'm going to introduce Mr. Caudill and let him go into his story about the Scopes trial, which we all are interested in. I know I am as a native Tennessean and a lawyer. It's been something I've been interested in for many years, and I look forward to hearing from you. Mr. Caudill.
Thank you, Mr. Cheatham. The Scopes trial is a blight on Tennessee's history. Now, I'm sorry, the Scopes trial is a black mark on Tennessee history. Now, it's taken me a while to come to that conclusion, and done so somewhat reluctantly. So let me fill in with just a bit of personal history, anecdotal material here. I came here in 1985 to the University of Tennessee. I had written a dissertation that concerned Darwin and the press. Scopes was not in the title, but he was a chapter. You can't do Darwin in America anything unless you come to the Scopes trial at some point. You've got to have it in the footnotes at least. But I went to the trouble to do a whole chapter. Well, to make it short, I came here with the idea it was one of those aberrant events in history, a deviation of some kind from the normal course of life. Lots of history does that. And so, therefore, we talk about Scopes. It was an oddball thing, and we go on with it. Well, a little over 10 years later, maybe 12, 13 years later, I've changed my mind. It is Tennessee history. That if you understand the Scopes trial, you'll understand much of Tennessee history. And I'm sure that's got to aggravate a few people. That's not my intention, but it's an honest opinion. The Scopes trial, as I pointed out, may have been one of the greatest calamities in Tennessee history because it branded the state for generations to come as a backwater, anti-intellectualism, Bible-thumping education haters. And one newspaper asked in 1925, why Dayton, of all places? That was the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And I think at the time they were a bit envious of this little town in Dayton getting all the attention, but that envy was short-lived because like those anticipated benefits to the local economy, it didn't last for very long, that envy or the benefits to the local economy. It started, as most of you know, with Tennessee's Butler Act. Tennessee was not alone in anti-evolution legislation. During the 20s, 20 different states had 37 different measures, resolutions, riders, and bills that, to varying degrees, criticized or banned evolution. So we're not alone there in Tennessee. But the idea was rather common. 6 state legislatures had already considered this kind of legislation before Tennessee did. Only 2 states, Florida and Oklahoma, finally adopted any such measures. So in early 1925, this legislation is winding its way through the state legislature. Not much public notice is even given this legislation in its early days. And it was only a vocal minority that was talking about it, and they were printing pamphlets in its favor. Well, John Washington Butler was the man that introduced it. Amiable, devout farmer. He was from rural Macon County. And Butler's didn't know a thing about evolution, but he did get interested in the issue after one Sunday a preacher in his local church had talked about a young woman who came back from college and believed in godless evolution. Well, that was enough to provoke him. So he ran for office shortly after that, hearing that sermon, and resolved that he was going to pass legislation to deal with that, and he lived up to his political promise. Opponents of that legislation cited freedom of expression. They cited the scientific validity of evolution. They also talked about the trial of Galileo, the execution of Bruno, and a group of ministers from Nashville, 13 of them in fact, actually sent a petition to the legislature that said, we don't like this. It's a bad idea. Ironically, the governor that signed the legislation into law, Austin Peay, was a progressive. And when he signed it into law, his thinking was, no one's going to notice. This will make people happy. It will not be enforced. Pure politics, if you will. Making a constituency happy and hoping it just slides under the table. So he, in fact, told a senator that the act was absurd and should not have been passed by the legislature. He did need these rural legislators to achieve his reforms, though. That's why he signed it. Well, the Tennessee law, as I said, was not enacted in a cultural vacuum. But I believe strongly that that's the image that's been depicted, particularly by East Coast newspapers, and in particular among those H.L. Mencken of the Baltimore Sun. And if you ever read his work, The Hills of Zion, you would understand his perspective on Tennessee. It was not kindly. Well, an American Civil Liberties Union survey concerning teaching restrictions cited statutes in 7 states at that time that required daily Bible readings and actually forbade the employment of radical or pacifist teachers. The survey was released in mid-1924, and it said there are more restrictive laws in the last 6 months than at any time in the history of the country. So there is something of a surge of intolerance. It's in the wake of World War I and the emerging modernism that bothered a lot of people. Well, Dayton. Let's talk about Dayton for a moment. Dayton, at this time in 1925,